not really colorblind. So let's think about it. You can talk about how Hillary Clinton is the best candidate, right, because she appeals to white voters. You can talk about Obama's race problem with the white working class. You can even talk about how black men are advantaged over women, and no one sees that as playing the race card. But when Obama makes the slight suggestion that his face doesn't look like the faces on American currency, lo and behold, he's playing the race card. So what's that telling us about the frame? What it's telling us is that certain common sense things about race can just be thrown out there, right? Even Obama can talk about responsibility and black fatherhood. But what he can't talk about, what he can't really advance is the idea that there is an ongoing problem of racism. I'm going to acknowledge it, and I'm going to ask you to look beyond that. That's called playing the race card. How come when Barack Obama talks about his daughters, he can talk about the sexism that they're going to face, but he can't talk about the racism they're going to face? How come?
There's either race-based affirmative action or class-based affirmative action. All those dichotomies, in fact, that dichotomous thinking in itself is problematic and prevents us from sort of seeing the complexities in which race plays out in this country. So part of it is to sort of think about race, a new way of talking about race. There's also tremendous resistance to talking about race, and there's sort of this desire to sort of get beyond it without really dealing with it. And part of this is based on fear, the fact that we may feel like we won't do it well. One of the dominant ways of talking about race is silence. And then we get into our closed circles and we then have conversation. Another dominant way, which I'll talk about a little bit, is surrogates. So we won't talk about race, but we'll talk about welfare. We'll talk about, and one of my favorite, you know, I grew up in Detroit. When I grew up in Detroit, it was the city. You know, after all the white folks left, it became the inner city. You know, it's like, it was like a horror movie, you know. They say, have you ever seen, what happened to Sally? I don't know, 5 years ago she went into the inner city. And no one's seen her since. So we have all these new codes that send messages about race. And then if you try to actually say, well, these codes are about race, then you get, are you playing the race card? How do we talk about race constructively? Race is the issue in the country that has energy. Race is a complex thing. And part of the complexity is also how it intersects with other issues, other things. How race interacts with gender, how it interacts with class, how it interacts with sexual orientation, how it interacts with religion. And so we need to sort of think about this as a interactive set of processes.
What I like to do is draw people out, get them to paint the picture in which they think race is irrelevant, and then ask them, well, what do you know about your own environment? Most people will eventually confess that either they live in a neighborhood that's monoracial, or they work in a job that is pretty much racially stratified, that their friendship and kinship and social capital networks are pretty much racially defined. Eventually, they're going to tell you something that can then be the predicate for saying, okay, let's just spin this out a little bit and see what this difference makes.
The reality is, in this country, we actually don't know what race is and the way race works. We actually don't know what class is and the way class works. And so even when we have the conversation, these conversations are really tropes for something else. If we had a real class analysis, you know, it would take us a long way. We don't have it. If we had a real racial analysis, it would take us a long way.